actions. And grant that, we having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, and true Christian love and charity, one towards another, in Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
This Honourable House now resumes its sitting. Call of the roll.
Mrs. Holness, Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Holness, Dr. Clark, Dr. Chang, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Samuda, Ms. Grange, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Mallow-Fort, Dr. Tufton, Mr. Mackenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Charles, Mr. Green, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Terrelong, Ms. Smith, Dr. Dunn, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Main, Ms. Davis, Mr. Witter, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown-Burke, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Clark, Mr. Cousins, Ms. Crawford, Ms. Daly, Ms. Davis, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Henriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Ms. Lee, Mr. Miller, Mr. Montague, Ms. Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Siblist, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wright. Mr. Hilton? Yeah.
Statements by ministers, announcements.
Madam Speaker, before you go, I just wanted to, as you can see, we are low in our numbers today, and it is really no sign of disrespect to the Parliament, but as you can appreciate, the notice having been late, and this actually came after our episode on Tuesday when we were told...
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Yeah.
You said statement by minister. I'm not aware that Mr. Spaldwell is a minister. You said statement by minister. So he's making a statement on the statement by minister. Never asked permission to say something, but he said statement by minister. And as far as I'm aware, Mr. Paulwell is not a minister. So you can't make a statement there.
So, Madam Speaker, I was going to go on to say that having been called back here in this manner, I was expecting a statement from a minister. And I think it does not reflect the importance of the role that we play inside here, that a matter of this nature could be seen in this type of routine way, without, at the commencement of the sitting, some statement be made as to really why are we back here. Of course, we are told that it is to receive the amended regulations, but there has to be further explanations in relation to that. And certainly on our side, there are some questions that we like to ask in relation to the operations of the SOE, which was declared last week in St. Catherine on the basis of regulations. Those first regulations we haven't seen, and we certainly want to see them because of the implications that they have for our country, for the revenues of the country. Last week, a court made a profound decision in relation to the unconstitutionality of the SOE. And we want to know this body inside here. That's why we are here. We are here to promulgate mainly legislation and regulations. And if we are to do it in this willy-nilly fashion, it can't work. And I was expecting that we would have gotten a statement today from the relevant minister explaining why we had this cock-up and who is accountable, what is going to happen here on in, so that this does not occur again. And I think that is only reasonable, Madam Speaker.
I heard you. I'm going to go through the agenda, and if necessary, we will recommit the items.
Madam Speaker, I'm getting your commitment that at the end of the agenda, we will recommit the item statement by ministers. Perfect.
Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today is the Emergency Powers Parish of St. Catherine number 3 regulations 2022 as contained in the Jamaica Gazette Supplement, Proclamations, Rules and Regulations 1267 volume 145 dated Wednesday, June 22, 2022, number 88.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions, motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to sittings of the House, motions for leave to introduce bills, presentation of bills without leave of the House, first obtain public business. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I ask at this time for the item statement by ministers for recommittal of that item.
The question before us as members is for recommittal of the item statements by ministers. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, the members raise an issue which is of national import and deserves to be responded to. Let me begin first by...
Just a moment.
Yeah. Begin first by thanking the colleagues for coming out in good number short response to today's sitting. The reason for coming, as indicated, is to lay the regulations number 3 for the emergency powers regulation. Maybe it's that emergency powers Parish of St. Catherine number 3 regulations. The initiation of the state of emergency in St. Catherine from a point of view of operation, the police was successful. They based the rioting on the killing stopped. However, we, unfortunately, on Tuesday, there was the regulation laid was the wrong set of regulations. The process of developing and initiating such a bill and legislation is well known to the members of the House. The Solicitor General, along with the Attorney General, who gives the instructions to the CPC after consultation with the ministers and the legal mind, the police force, and the JDF. That was done to take into account the ruling of the court, which was published on Friday, same day as the state and national public appearance was announced. There are a number of questions raised about several issues within the regulation. We are not here to debate those today. They expect the opposition will take time to look at them. But in reviewing them, amendments were made to a number of them in order to meet the standards that was being asked of by the court. Those amendments were made and were provided to me on Sunday. This is the copy I have, which has all the amendments, hard copy, taken to the Governor General and signed. And my understanding is that this was sent to the printer. This is what is normally done. That's the process. What came back on Tuesday was not what I have in my hand. How that happened is a matter of concern. As I indicated, we'll investigate to understand how and why, because it is of concern to me personally, as a minister responsible at this point in time, why such a grave error could have been made. It not only puts the Parliament under pressure, it's not a good sign. So, Madam Speaker, that is what I have to say. I said the review to meet the relevant standards as indicated by the court was done by the legal advisor of government, and the changes made and documented and signed off on by the Governor General and sent to the printers. Now, what happened between it's being signed by the Governor General, I received this myself, this is the only hard copy, which again is standard practice because of the nature of the regulation. It is not circulated in draft form. I get a copy, the Prime Minister gets a copy, and the Minister gets a copy. It was the Minister of Justice who oversees the Attorney General's Department. So this had all. The Minister of Justice? Yes, that's the ASG reports to them. The Minister, right? Right? Therefore, Madam Speaker and members, I expected this would have been brought to Parliament. It's because of the timing in terms of review. No review was done before the tabling. I too went off to another event in Clarendon, as you're aware. And when I got in and reviewed the document, I realized what I had was almost identical to the document that was published on Saturday. I said how it happened and why. I will assure the members of Parliament. I will investigate because someone else will be held accountable for this grievous mistake. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I was trying to get an explanation just now in relation to the first set of regulations, because this is intended to revoke the second set that were tabled on Tuesday. And that was supposed to revoke the first set. So what is operating now, as we have been experiencing the state of emergency since last Friday? What are the regulations and what are the implications having regard to the court process? So it would be useful to know, for example, how many persons would have been detained under these regulations. And finally, Minister, where is the tribunal? Has there been a tribunal announced? Is it up and running? Perhaps you could explain those for us.
The police are made aware of this. In fact, even before this, on Tuesday, after the court ruling was analyzed and regulation 2 which was supposed to be this regulation, was printed in error, the police have not utilized any of the powers in the regulation. A number of critical players were apprehended and they are being held under the Jamaica Concealed Force Act. That is, most of them have been charged because they are charged that could be delayed, and I think a couple are being awaiting identification. But nobody is being currently detained under any powers in the regulation.
So just to be absolutely clear, you're saying that since this state of emergency was, I think one of us will have to sit.
Sorry.
Yes. Since the state of emergency was introduced on Friday in the parish of St. Catherine, nobody has been held under the regulations that were in place prior to, that came into effect on Friday morning. That's what you're saying.
No, nobody has been so held.
Through you, Speaker, Minister, you said that nobody has been held. That seems contrary to some reports I've heard in the news.
I said nobody has been detained under the regulations. A number of people have been apprehended by the police. Most of them have been charged. I think it's critical players who were apprehended after the declaration, and they've been charged, and others are awaiting ID period, but nobody is being held under regulation. They are being held under the Constabulary powers, JCF Act.
Minister, I just want to follow up on that because I'm trying to wrap my head around it. Since Friday, we all were aware that a state of emergency was in operation. What you're saying is that the persons who were detained since Friday were not detained using the regulations. And I am just wondering, because many persons had been saying before that there were other instruments, there were other provisions under which persons could have been held and the work of the police could have been done. And the fact that since Friday, many of what was published as news, persons actually thought that this was because of the state of emergency. But if they were not held under those provisions, then it means that without the state of emergency, those things could have been done and they could have been held. And so I would really like to hear a little bit more of an explanation, because it seems to reinforce the notion that there are other instruments and other ways of going about what we are doing with apprehending persons without using this.
It's a moot question, member, but I'd rather be briefed by the police because we instructed them according to law, and they indicated that I've done some things. They would not have done everything, but what they have apprehended is within the powers they currently have as constabulary. Right? So nobody was detained by the JDF is out there assisting them. They have not exercised the powers of the constabulary, and the police force continues to operate within that framework. We had a number of curfews out there before, which is standard operation. Before we take on the SOE, we institute the curfews to set the stage for it. But I will certainly seek to get further information, because details of operations and indicate to you. All right.
Just to follow up, to add two questions, but I wanted you to answer one first. Thanks for the commitment to follow up, because I believe that a lot of persons, and me included, would be very interested in hearing a little bit more about that. Minister, you would imagine that I'm glad that you have indicated that there will be a proper investigation as to how this kerfuffle came to be. And I think you wouldn't expect that, having been called 2 days in a row for the same matter, that those of us, Thursday for me and for many of us, is our constituency day. And when we have to come in, it is important to understand how these errors occur so that they can be prevented. And I believe also that the time that we spend in our constituencies, that's really very important. And this is 2 days that we were called just for this and to go back. So I want to make sure, Minister, that you make good on that commitment to ensure that there is an investigation and that we are told exactly what has happened so it would not occur again.
Look, we're all elected members, and as I said, I really appreciate the members coming. And I'll always say, in principle, we're on call 24 hours for national duty, but yes, we all understand Thursday at this time is not only a constituency day for most in the room, but it's a time of graduation, and everybody wants to go there, and therefore I need to give a justifiable reason for pulling you out here, and I will so pursue so when the debate arises. Just to note that, as we discussed, to be firm, to be clear, the court did not rule that the declaration of a state of emergency was not appropriate for what it was called for. At that point, it was accepted. They dealt specifically with a number of regulations which we are seeking to amend, and we will have an opportunity to review them, and we have discussion again, so we can have agreement on the consensus, because I think the court clearly accepted that the state of public emergency is a tool required where the level of violence can be used, where the level of violence reaches a certain critical point.
Minister, the question about the tribunal, has it been established? And also in relation to how we move on from here, are we going to be required? I think notice should be given if we are needed next week and the week after, so that people can plan their no, well, I object to that.
Thank you. Now, the tribunal, as you're aware, the Governor General appoints the tribunal based on the recommendation of the Chief Justice and the Prime Minister. That tribunal has been appointed. They have not yet received their instrument, and I therefore could not announce. But the names are settled, and the Governor General has and will prepare the requisite instruments. I expect we'll meet on Tuesday, and we'll have this debate in Parliament, as well as discussions as to how we move from here. I think it's important we move on this with some level of consensus.
Minister, has the government taken steps to determine the potential liability that you may face given the ruling last week Friday and the award of $18 million to one individual and the possibility that there are maybe tens or hundreds of others? And is there going to be a mechanism set up to avoid a long legal process, but to settle with those claimants who may be in a similar position to the one who was awarded $18 million?
The ruling is subject to review by the Attorney General's Department, and I await that advice before I make any commitments or give any undertaking. All right. I said I will await the advice at the end.
Of clarification, just by way of clarification and some guidance, Minister, this state of emergency is valid for 14 days as of last week, Friday. In the normal courses of emergency, real emergency, not anticipated, contemplated event like flood, hurricane, things like those, these short-term ones are usually used. However, over the past 3 years, outside of natural disasters like those, states of emergency have been used as a crime-fighting tool. With that said, where an extension is desired by the government, it will require 2/3 on the opposition side. So the question is it intended not to go beyond the 14 days that the government can unilaterally pursue, or is it that there will, as so far as you are aware of up to today, and I presume that as Minister of National Security, the Chief of the Defence Staff and the Commissioner would be keeping you apprised almost on a daily basis on the success of the state of emergency to deal with crime fighting, since that's the purpose of it. So my question is, have you been apprised that there may be a need to extend it beyond the 14 days, which will require the opposition? And in such an instance, have you begun to engage the opposition in that regard? I'm not aware of such engagement.
You're not aware of?
Any engagement for an extension beyond the 14 days?
Member, let me say, we know it. I fully appreciate and need the support of the opposition if we are to proceed beyond the time. But the decision to move on depends on the recommendation of the heads of the security forces. It will appear they may very well act. If they do, I will certainly engage the opposition outside of the chamber before coming here. In fact, I'll say publicly, I've indicated that we have indicated to the opposition that the Commissioner of Police will give the opposition a full intelligence briefing on the events in St. Catherine, where he was convinced the government that the threshold of violence justified an event, the introduction of a state of public emergency. So far, it has indeed had an impact. Once I get the request before coming here on Tuesday, as there will be a sitting on Tuesday, close, I will consult with the leader of the opposition, your House leader. Right.
So as of now, you have not gotten such intimation?
Thank you, members. So, just for clarity with the House, the regulation numbered 2, which is Gazette number 123, revoked the very first regulation that was passed in 2022. And regulation number 3, which is laid on the table today, which is Gazette number 125, revokes regulation number 2, which was passed on Tuesday, which was laid on the table on Tuesday. So the only regulation that the government has enforced now that is laid on the table is regulation number 3 with Gazette number 125. House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was a girl guide, and in my days we had rediffusion, and at midnight we would hear the national anthem, and if I'm awake, I get up out of my bed and I stand to attention. That's how I was brought up. And as a girl guide, our motto said, be prepared.
It's the House Leader addressing the House.
And the motto said, be prepared. And as parliamentarians elected by the people, we have to be prepared. And I really want to express my appreciation to the members of Parliament who are here this afternoon, because they are prepared. Thank you for making sure that you fulfill that commitment that you have made to the people. You need to be in Parliament, you get short notice, and you make yourselves available, and you are to be applauded. And the world is watching us on PBCJ and on social media, and I'm proud of all of you who made it here today. Madam Speaker, it is not Madam Speaker, it is not contemplated for us to do any further business today. I therefore ask for the House to be adjourned until Tuesday, June 28 at 2 p.m. sharp.
Members, a question before the House is that we do adjourn until Tuesday the 28th at 2 p.m. sharp. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. This House is now adjourned.